Hi, Jen. I'm just going to turn your video off just so it streams a bit better. Hello. All right, so I've got my chat box here. So down the bottom of your screen, you should have a little like speech bubble thingy, and you can click on that to ask me any questions. So I'll be looking down at my phone just so that I can keep track of the chat box at the same time. And we'll just give everyone a little bit more time to come in, and then we'll get started. Cool. All right, we're bang on 8 o'clock according to my watch. So I'm going to share my screen for most of the webinar tonight. And yeah, I think I'll still be in the corner kind of, but I don't need anyone else's video on or audio. You can just type into the chat box if you have any questions as we go, and I will get started. Cool. All right. So just bear with me if you missed it. I'm just looking down at my phone to check the chat box as we go. And yeah, ask me any questions as we go along. Love to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. So tonight is all about finding balance in the silly season. Probably starting September. I already had clients coming in saying that they were worried about the like weight gain or just stressing about food, overindulging, feeling like they should skip some social events so that they're not eating as much or not going to put on as much weight. And so I thought it would be really important to share some of the ways that you can find balance over the holiday period without actually like avoiding social events or, missing out on fun. And I think that we've probably, most of us, got enough stress over the holidays without worrying about food and what we're eating. So that's what today is all about, or tonight, I should say. So this is me. I'm Dannielle, if any of you don't know me yet. I'm a naturopath, kinesiologist, and writer, and I've been in the industry for over 7 years now. So I actually started off specializing in weight loss, and I've done that for a long time, and I still work with weight loss clients. But one of the biggest things that I found was it would just break my heart to have clients come back to me. They've got more energy, they're less bloated, they're less stressed, like all of these things have improved. But if the scales hadn't budged or they haven't lost a certain dress size, then they're still feeling really crappy about themselves. And it just made me realize that all that other stuff is so much more important to me than weight loss specifically. Weight loss for me, I've been through my own journey, and it really is more of like a side effect of making healthy long-term changes. I don't like doing diets or fads or anything like that. So I still definitely work in weight loss, but it's really more about just simplifying health and helping people make those long-term changes that inevitably lead to weight loss, but it's actually about that weight management as well. I live in Adelaide with my new husband. So we only got married in May. You might have noticed my name change if you have followed me for a little while. And our 3 fur babies. So we've got a border collie and 2 cats, and they are the best of friends. Like, it's ridiculous how close they are for dogs and cats. And just a random little side note, my favorite food is pad thai. Like, always, hands down, can't beat it. I actually lived in Thailand for about 2-3 months. And I think almost every day I ate pad thai, and I'm still not sick of it. It's just so good. So enough about me. What we're going to cover on tonight's webinar. So we're going to go through how to stay healthy this holiday season without compromising your social life. How to avoid like the guilt and regret and stress and all of that stuff that comes with food. And how to avoid emotional eating as well, because particularly if you're kind of seeing people that you don't normally see for the rest of the year, sometimes we can really be triggered by that and turn to that kind of emotional eating tendency. So I'll cover that. And also how to cope with unsupportive friends and family, because that can be a really big issue in social situations. If you're if someone makes a comment, sometimes that can then trigger you in that social situation. So we'll go through how to cope with that. And then obviously any of your questions as well. So I'll keep looking down and checking the chat box. And please just ask me questions as we go, because while I'm on the topic, I'd love to answer your questions then. Since I haven't heard from anyone, can someone just post in the chat box and let me know you can hear me okay? Just so I know I'm not talking for no reason. And then, we'll get in. Cool, Jen can hear me. I'll assume that means everyone can. Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Chris. Cool. Okay, so now tell me in the chat box, which if you missed it is that little speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. If you click that and then make sure you're sending it to everyone. And I want you to type in what's the number one thing that derails your consistency. So most of my clients say, I know what I need to do, I just can't stay consistent with it. So I want you to tell me what is the hardest thing about consistency for you. And I'm going to give you a minute or so just to type that in. Don't be shy. Someone's got to go first. And then I'm going to tell you what I think the number one reason is. So there's no right or wrong answers. Anything at all. Loving all foods. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I agree with that, Jen. But I'm going to teach you tonight how to still love all foods and probably love them even more and still be really consistent, which is awesome because I'm such a foodie. I don't ever believe in restricting foods unless there's like a health reason. So yeah, we're going to be covering all of that. Looks like Jen's the only brave one who's going to share. Okay, so in all the work that I've done with clients, there's one thing that hands down will ruin consistency every single time, and that is the way you actually think about and approach your food and health. So having a drink or two. Yeah, Lynn, that can really be, that can really like change things a little bit, but I'll also be covering how to do that and, you know, not feel guilty or not ruin your consistency. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so the number one thing, Jen loves her drinks. The number one thing that impacts consistency is actually the way that you approach food and health. And what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to just kind of introduce you, I guess, if you haven't been introduced to this before, to a different way of approaching food. So often it's the idea of restricting things, trying to deprive yourself, trying to say no, trying to have more willpower, and then, you know, dieting once you get to a certain weight and you want to bring it down. So you're on a fad diet, and it's this really unhealthy relationship with food. So if food is a source of stress or guilt for you, I'm going to help you to actually flip that around tonight. And like Jen said, she loves all the foods. I'm going to teach you how you can love all the foods and not give anything up and actually stay way more consistent and way healthier that way, rather than the restriction, deprivation, you know, that kind of the, well, I call it the old way of thinking, like the traditional diet philosophy. So the first thing that I want to bring up is guilt, because it's something that I think as women, we're just kind of prone to guilt. Like we make ourselves feel guilty for all kinds of things. But when it comes to food, I like to use the analogy of a guilt monster. And I have one. I think everyone has one. A guilt monster sits on your shoulder. And for me personally, and you might relate to this, I know a lot of my clients do, if I feel like chocolate and my guilt monster is particularly loud this night, I'm going to have a little bit of chocolate, and the guilt monster on my shoulder is going to be like, that's terrible. You shouldn't have done that. You should feel really guilty for that. And to kind of quiet down the guilt monster, or just like get it over and done with, I'm way more likely to eat the whole block. So the guilt monster makes you eat more, makes you feel really crappy. It actually takes away the enjoyment. Like if I'm scoffing down a whole block of chocolate, I'm not actually enjoying it, especially by the second half. Like I love chocolate. I can go a fair way, but especially towards the end, you're not even enjoying it anymore. You're just trying to get it over and done with, eat it all in one go, because then tomorrow's a new day and you can start again, blah, blah, blah. Like all those things that we tell ourselves, or that the guilt monster tells us. So if I was to feel like chocolate and not listen to the guilt monster on my shoulder, I'm way more able to just eat like enough chocolate that, you know, like 3 squares, 6 squares, or even nicer kinds of chocolate. Like I might choose a Lindt instead of a Cadbury kind of thing. But when I'm not feeling guilty about it, I can actually just enjoy that food and listen to my own body's cues on when I've had enough, instead of feeling guilty, trying to eat it all in one go and giving in to the guilt monster. Is that resonating with anyone? So what we want to do is actually not listen to the guilt monster, get him off our shoulders, and not feel guilty for foods that we're eating and enjoying, particularly over the holiday season, because we are, you know, going to have more indulgent foods, I guess. But when we're not feeling guilty about it, we can actually eat in moderation and not feel the need to overindulge or suppress that feeling of guilt. One of the things about eating, we have a chakra, like an energy center in our throat, and it's all about expressing yourself. And so that's where emotions come out. That's where, you know, speaking your truth and things like that. And one of the things with eating is that the actual physical act of eating pushes down our emotions and feelings. So as the food goes down, the emotions and feelings that we don't want to feel go down as well. And that, you know, ties in with emotional eating, but also just making ourselves feel guilty about eating certain foods. We're more likely to eat more to squash down that feeling of guilt, because it's not a very nice feeling. So how do we change it? So getting rid of the restrictions and limitations that you place on yourself, it sounds so backwards, and it took me quite a while to get used to this, like truly, but you're allowed to eat anything you want. And when you take away that pressure and that guilt, you're able to focus on foods that actually make you feel good, instead of feeling like if you're having something bad, which I don't agree with calling any foods bad, but if you're having something that's so-called bad, and you're not allowed to eat it, then you're more likely to eat more of it in that situation and promise yourself that you won't have it tomorrow. Whereas when you're allowed to eat anything you want, you can focus on foods that make you feel good. You can have those 3 squares of chocolate instead of the whole block, and you don't have to feel guilty about anything. I really stress to my clients not to weigh themselves constantly, because it doesn't change anything about who they are. And when you make these changes and get rid of the restrictions and limitations, your weight will naturally go to your healthiest weight. Like it's called a set point, and your body actually regulates it the same way it regulates your blood pressure or blood glucose. So when you're focusing on your health and foods that make you feel good, and taking away those restrictions and limitations and the guilt and all that stuff, your body will naturally just kind of move back to the weight that it's healthiest at. And you don't have to kind of force it and then have the rebound. It's just that natural process, and then it's easier to maintain. So when you allow yourself to eat whatever you want, there's no need to overeat or feel guilty or stress about it. And you will actually find it easier to eat well when you're not putting so much pressure on yourself. And it takes a little while to get used to. Sometimes clients will tend to kind of rebel, you know, like, I'm allowed to eat whatever I want. I will just eat everything. And then they get to a point where it's like, well, actually, this isn't really making me feel good. So if we join the two together, you're allowed to eat anything you want. Nothing is going to cause you guilt, but you're also focusing on what makes you feel good. Those two together is something that takes practice, but it's honestly a winning combination, and it will completely change the way that you approach food and your health. Other small changes, so something I see a lot, and I mean, I've been there myself, is the all or nothing attitude, and particularly over the holidays. So I like to use the analogy of if you dropped your phone on the ground and it had like a little crack in the screen, you wouldn't just keep throwing it on the ground and like stomping on it until it completely smashed. So when it comes to food and making food choices, just because you might blow out and feel not so good after a big meal, one social event, it doesn't mean you have to go all out and just continue to feel like crap. You have a decision at every meal and snack. So it gives you permission to enjoy the social events and the times that you're out, and not feel guilty about any of that. But it doesn't mean that you need to not care about what you're eating in between. So absolutely no guilt with anything that you're eating, but you do want to feel good. And the all or nothing attitude, it doesn't feel good, because generally it's just, well, I give up completely and I'll just, start again in January. And it might feel like, it might logically sound good, but it actually makes you feel really guilty on the inside, and it makes it harder to make good choices, outside of those social events. So it's not all or nothing. You're always making a decision when you're eating, and it's really about that balance between, foods that nourish your body and foods that you enjoy socially. Jen's just said, I weigh myself regularly to see if I'm reaching my goals and heading in the right direction. It makes me happy to see the scales going down. Feels like the key to losing weight. It keeps me in check. Yeah, and that's fine, Jen. The issue that I have with weighing yourself regularly, two things. One is that the scales change so quickly. So particularly for women, we hold water weight at different times of our cycle. So if you're weighing yourself daily, it can be a really inaccurate way to measure changes. If you're weighing yourself once a fortnight, once a month, just to kind of keep in check, then that's totally fine. I have no cycle. You still have changes in your fluid retention because you still have estrogen, which is produced by the fat cells. So there'll still be slight changes, and even just like bowel habits and things like that. But obviously less changes in if you don't have your period anymore. You will have less fluid retention shifts. But yeah, so just keep in mind that it's not super accurate if you're doing it daily. And also that if you are someone who's prone to feeling really down if the scales don't move the way you want them to, then it can be really unhelpful. I know for myself, it's great when the scales are moving down when I was on my weight loss journey. But if I stood on it once and it went up, I just completely lost it. And I would do the all or nothing kind of thing. So I would probably have like a week of just eating crap and binging because I felt like I had failed. And that's the kind of thing that I want my clients to avoid. So if you're someone that can see, like the scales help you stay on track, that's awesome. And you can kind of stay resilient if they don't move the way you want them to, then that's really good. But I find it really, it can be really unhelpful if you tend to be impacted when they move up, even if it's just a little bit. So that's where I come from with the scales. Cool. Alcohol is something that can often be overdone. So I think Lynn and Jen said they like having a drink or two, and that's totally fine. If you want to be aware of it, just sometimes swap beer, cider, and wine for something lighter like a vodka lemon soda or a gin and tonic. There's never anything to be guilty for. So I don't want you to see these changes as something like you shouldn't be having wine or anything like that. But if it makes you feel better to just kind of switch between the higher calorie drinks and the lower calorie drinks, then that's totally fine. If that takes stress off you in social situations and helps you enjoy the holiday season more, then do that. If you're really worried about social events, you can eat before you go and you won't feel as tempted by the snacks, but be careful of the intention there. So it's not eat before you go because you're not allowed to eat anything at the party or whatever it is. It's eat before you go so that you don't have to stress about it and you don't have to worry about overeating when you get to that social event. Yeah, so gin and tonic is way better than beer, wine, or cider, Lynn, because it's a lot lower calorie. So it's really about the intent behind all of these things. When I'm suggesting these changes, none of it is that you should feel guilty for anything. You are allowed to eat whatever you want, no guilt, no deprivation, no restriction, but focus on what makes you feel good and what makes it easier for you to get through the holidays. Lynn's happy with the gin and tonic. So, yeah, if it makes it easier for you to go out socially because you've already eaten, then do that. If it makes it easier for you and you'll stress less if you know that you're having a gin and tonic instead of a wine, then do that. So those kind of things are really easy shifts, but remember that they're not coming from a place of deprivation or guilt at all. Emotional eating. So holiday season can definitely be difficult. A lot of us see people that we try to avoid for the other 11 months of the year. And if you're prone to emotional eating, the best thing that you can do is actually learn to recognize your emotions. And the reason that we don't tend to do this is because it's not very fun. But it is more fun than emotional eating and binge eating and, you know, that whole kind of cycle that I have definitely been in before, and I see it with a lot of my clients. So it's really about checking in with yourself. Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling lonely? Am I feeling rejected? Like, am I feeling da-da-da? Whatever comes to mind, you might go through a few feelings before you're like, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That's what's going on. So you've sat with yourself, you've identified what's going on. And if you can, like if you're at a party or something, you don't want to probably allow yourself to feel it then and there. But if you can, allow yourself to actually feel that feeling. So as I said with the throat chakra, like the energy center, food is our way of pushing down feelings that we don't want to feel because they're not very nice to feel generally. But if we can find ways to soothe ourselves without food, whether that's like talking to a friend or going for a walk if that tends to clear your mind, having a bath, diffusing some essential oils, like anything that you can do for self-care and to soothe yourself that doesn't involve eating, do that. And it might take you a while to figure out what you can do, or you might have a list of things that you can choose from in the moment. If you're out and you feel like emotional eating, promise yourself that you'll do something when you get home or when you next have a chance, because obviously you can't like go and have a bath at your friend's house if you're at a party. But being aware of what emotion am I feeling, how does it feel to actually hold that emotion in my body without fighting it, without suppressing it with food, how does that actually feel, and then letting that emotion pass. It takes a lot of practice, and this is something that I still have to be really mindful of, but it's so much easier than the emotional eating, binge eating cycle. Another thing that I'll mention on emotional eating, because it's not on the slide, but it's quite important, is our brain has this chemical called serotonin. It's kind of like a happy hormone chemical thing. And when we eat carbohydrates, we actually get like a tiny little boost of serotonin. So sometimes if you're emotional eating, it may not be that you're feeling a particular feeling. It may just be that you don't have enough serotonin and your brain's craving some. So then you eat a little bit of carbs or sugar, you get a tiny boost of serotonin, and then what happens is you actually crash back down and your serotonin drops lower. And when you kind of go on this cycle and use carbs for serotonin long term, you actually deplete your brain's ability to make serotonin in healthy levels. So then you're kind of almost like addicted to carbohydrates or addicted to that way of getting serotonin into the brain. So we want to get off that vicious cycle. And one of the best ways to naturally boost your serotonin is just to get outside and move your body in a way that feels good. It doesn't have to be a run or anything like that. It can be just like the slowest walk around the block you could imagine. It's still going to boost your body's natural production of serotonin. And that can help with the carbohydrate cravings if that's a cycle that's going on for you. Exercise. So a lot of my clients try to exercise to make up for overeating, almost like they're punishing themselves for eating and enjoying themselves over the holidays. But the truth is, and it's unfortunate, but exercise really can't undo or outdo, I should say, your food choices. Exercise is actually only 10% of your entire energy expenditure. The rest is your metabolism and then like non-exercise activities. So things like fidgeting, like me waving my arms around talking, is actually using up calories. Standing instead of sitting, taking the stairs instead of the escalator, like those kind of things, as well as the food that you're eating, makes up 90% of your energy expenditure. Exercise only 10%. So you can't outdo the 90% with the 10%. It doesn't add up. So slogging it out at the gym definitely isn't the answer for weight maintenance, and punishing your body for food that you've eaten is just going back to that unhelpful approach to food and health. It's really detrimental in the long term. So no punishing your body, please. Exercise won't outdo food choices, but we're not feeling guilty for anything over the holiday. So there's no need to punish yourself anyway. One thing about metabolism is the best way to ruin your metabolism is by dieting. So if you're still not kind of sold on the whole eat whatever you want thing, the biggest factor with it is that you're not dieting and you're not ruining your metabolism. So you're able to maintain a healthy metabolism rate. You're able to reach your goal weight or healthiest weight without struggling, without sacrificing anything, without feeling guilty or deprived. And you're actually able to maintain all of those changes that you've made long term, rather than this kind of up down of weight and just like slowly decreasing your metabolism every time you try another diet. So, which of course makes it harder to lose weight in the future if your metabolism is slowing down. So exercise is not the answer. Dieting is not the answer because it's ruining your metabolism, and that is more important than exercise. But yeah, don't punish yourself for what you're eating, because it only makes things harder in the long run. All right, and unsupportive friends and family. So if you're at an event and you're trying to make good choices with your food and drinks and someone makes an unhelpful comment about you restricting yourself, what do? Most of us probably pile up our plate a bit higher and sit in the corner and hope no one's watching. But what can we do? So my philosophy on everything is that if someone is making a comment to you, it says more about them than it does about you. So you don't have to take on board what anyone else says to you. Nothing is personal. It's only other people's stuff. So when I say stuff, it's kind of like it's their baggage or it's their thoughts and feelings that are coming out. And you don't need to buy into that. Some of my clients like to imagine the words like physically bouncing off them so that they're not taking it into, into their heart or taking it personally. You might like to smile. You can change the subject or find a quick remark that feels right for you. And if you know that you have unsupportive people that you tend to see at this time of year, then, make something up in your head that you can actually use when that moment comes, because you know that it's probably most likely going to come up. So a really easy example is, the kind of passive aggressive, like, oh, look at you being all healthy. Are you on a diet or something? And instead of kind of justifying or anything like that, you can just say, no, not at all. I'm just enjoying the holidays. What are your plans for Christmas or New Year's Eve or, whatever's next? So it's kind of like a vague non-response that changes the subject and, brings it back onto them. And it doesn't engage in the conversation. You don't have to justify anything at all. Let me just, okay. So, in summary, most people tend to stress about the holiday season, but it's so much easier if you can actually just allow yourself to enjoy it. It's not an all or nothing. It's one decision at a time, and you can always make a different decision next time you eat. So there's no reason to, smash your phone on the ground when you've got just a tiny crack in the screen. Just keep moving forward. Recognize your emotions and process them. So food suppresses your emotions. If you're able to recognize them and let them out, then you don't need the food to push them down. And if you need to, if you do have these people in your life, and a lot of us do, then have something quick that you can say when friends and family make unsupportive comments. Remember, it's their stuff. It says more about them than it does about you. Okay. Any final questions? Because we are running out of time. I'm about to get kicked out of my software that I'm using. So pop your questions in the chat box if you have them. I'm just going to tell you about my 3-session offer. So because so many of you are stressing about the holiday season, if you do want more support, more than what I've given on the call today, I'm offering 3 sessions before Christmas for only $250. So it's normally $300. And basically what we're going to do is help you stay on track, help shift your relationship with food. Often that's something that people need a bit of support with. We'll get rid of emotional eating. We'll get rid of the guilt monster. We'll help you make better decisions when it comes to food and drinks. And I'll make sure you understand what foods are best for your body type. That can really help reduce the stress, because then you know what you're doing and you know that what you're doing is right for your body type individually, not a generic thing. So the 3 sessions are basically designed to help you maintain your health and sanity over the silly season so that you can just enjoy it without stressing, without worrying about what you're eating at all. You'll have a flexible plan in place. You'll know your guidelines in terms of what works best for your body, and you'll have a much better relationship with food because there really is no reason to feel guilty about anything that you're eating at all. Any questions before we wrap up? I haven't got any come through, so I'm going to assume that we're all good. If you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch via email or Facebook. I'm all over the social media, so you'll find me somewhere. You're welcome, Lynn. So yeah, if you have any other questions, please get in touch. And cool. No worries, Jenny. Yeah, that's all that I had to talk about tonight. So we've just got in before the software kicks me off. You're welcome, Chris. So I really do hope you have a wonderful, guilt-free and stress-free holiday season. And I know that some of the stuff in here is a little bit confusing when you first hear about it, but when you change your relationship with food, it really does free you up to just relax and enjoy especially over the holiday season. We've got enough to stress about over that time. So thank you for joining me. And yeah, I look forward to having you on my next webinar, probably next year, because Christmas is coming up so soon. All right. Have a good night, everyone. See you, Julie. Bye, everyone.